please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Hi there, good morning and welcome. You're watching Power Breakfast on CNBC TV18. I'm Manglam Malu. With me is Ekta Batra. Good morning, Ekta. Crude, that turns out to be a bit of a problem. 2.5-year high on that one.
Yes, morning Manglam. Well, we have a lot to work with in terms of cues when it comes to even flows from the FII stable to Brent crude, which has spiked up around 2 to 3% overnight. But these are top stories. Rallying energy shares and corporate deal-making push U.S. markets to another set of record highs. Asia opens mixed. A crackdown on corruption in Saudi Arabia has sent oil soaring to its highest price that we've seen in more than 2 years.
I am neither an officer nor a director nor an investor in Seaboard. In fact, I've never met them, don't know the people.
U.S. Secretary Wilbur Ross, he meets with Russian companies linked to Vladimir Putin. A new leak reveals offshore secrets of global elite and corporations. The Kremlin is also allegedly behind a Russian billionaire's investments into Facebook and Twitter.
And the finance ministers of Congress rule states come together and slam GST implementation, call it a lost opportunity on job creation and seek a rejig of items in the 28% tax bracket. The war of words just comes days ahead of the GST Council meeting this Friday.
Key earnings today, BHEL profits seen rising 64%, margin expansion to be led by favorable operating leverage and lower legacy orders. From the pharmaceutical pack, Cipla revenue growth will be driven by sequential recovery in India and Invigen portfolio in the US. Watch for margin improvement sustaining in the second quarter.
Tata Chemicals sells its Haldia fertilizer unit in West Bengal to IRC Agrochemicals, a subsidiary of Netherlands-based Indorama Holdings, for 375 crores.
HDFC Standard Life Insurance is looking to raise 8,700 crore rupees through an initial public offer that opens today. Price band fixed at 275 to 290 rupees a piece. Right, let's take a look at the Asian markets. They're fairly mixed in early trade. That is after the US stocks closed at record levels and oil prices too traded at their highest level since 2015 overnight, amid the backdrop that investors will also be watching for headlines as President Donald Trump's tour of Asia continues, with the president expected to arrive in South Korea following his two-day visit to Japan. The Japanese index up almost 0.5%, and that's primarily on the back of a mild bit of weakness that we're seeing in the dollar yen. Remember, on Friday it was at levels of around 114.1, but then thereafter, since yesterday's close, we're seeing a wee bit of weakness there. Crude, that one continues to gain headlines or raise headlines. The energy stocks, they're buzzing around. The Korean market's up almost 0.15%. The other indices should come up for you too, the Straits as well as the Taiwanese index. They are up and about in trade today, a gain of nearly 0.3 to about 0.5% seen on both those indices. And what does that mean for SGX Nifty? Well, it is a start at that magic mark that is inclusive of the futures premium. A 25-point uptake is what the SGX Nifty indicates for our own markets. And Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, he's announced plans to make additional sanction measures against North Korea over its escalating missile and nuclear development. Abe plans to freeze the assets of 35 North Korean groups in response to the nation's escalating nuclear program. He made the announcement during a joint news conference after holding talks with President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Trump had repeated his mantra that the era of strategic patience with North Korea is over and said the two countries are working to counter the dangerous aggressions.
I will say, if I could just take a piece of the Prime Minister's answer, he will shoot them out of the sky when he completes the purchase of lots of additional military equipment from the United States. He will easily shoot them out of the sky, just like we shot something out of the sky the other day in Saudi Arabia, as you saw.
U.S. President Donald Trump is headed to South Korea today, his second stop on a 12-day trip across Asia, and talks with South Korean President Moon Jae-in. The standoff with North Korea is likely to loom large. When he arrives in Seoul, Trump is scheduled to meet with his South Korean counterpart, speak to service members from both countries, and address the National Assembly in Seoul as well. CNBC's Sherry Kang reports on the same.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in has a little bit of preview of what he can expect from President Trump's visit in Japan. So they may not be able to cozy up like he did with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Well, yes, the shortest leg in his 5 Asian nation tour. But certainly, when you want to talk about agenda, North Korea is very much expected high up on the agenda. And there will be other items such as a free trade agreement. Of course, he had already called it a horrible deal. So there are moves to already make amendments to this free trade agreement that is expected early next year. But what kind of tone and what kind of degree of changes that he's going to call for in this particular deal is very much in question. But of course, there are other items. South Korea's Moon is going to want to talk about the transfer of wartime operational control. And does Trump have potential arms deal and potential sharing a defense cost issue in his mind when he's visiting South Korea this afternoon? So many questions. Back over to you.
Okay, well, a lot to look forward to in terms of Trump's comments in South Korea. But moving on Wall Street, U.S. equities hit record highs. The Dow Jones rose 9 points to an all-time high. The Nasdaq Composite also closed to an all-time high yesterday, rising 0.3%, while the S&P 500 finished 0.1% higher. CNBC's Leslie Picker gets a wrap of all what took place on Wall Street for us.
U.S. markets slightly higher today, the Dow adding 9 points, the S&P up 3 points, and the Nasdaq tacking on 22 points. Oil prices soaring to the highest levels in over 2 years as the Saudi crown prince detained several princes and ministers over the weekend on anti-corruption allegations. U.S. crude heading to over $57 a barrel. 21st Century Fox has been holding talks to sell most of the company to Disney. That's according to sources familiar with the matter that talked to CNBC. There is currently no certainty of a deal, and potential prices were not disclosed, though the discussions reflect the belief in some of Fox's upper management that a tighter group of properties would enable the company to better compete in a rapidly changing media landscape. Call it the Amazon Netflix effect. New York Fed President William Dudley announcing he will retire earlier than previously expected in mid-2018. Dudley played a key role in managing the fallout of the 2008 financial crisis in the U.S. In a speech today, Dudley appealed to Congress to, quote, do no harm as they consider rolling back regulations put in place to protect the U.S. economy after the financial crisis. That's the action from the U.S. market. You have a good trading day in India. Back to Mumbai.
All right, then let's shift focus to the European markets. In Europe, stocks posted minor gains. Actually, they were little moved. Investors, remember, they're eyeing the sharp rise that we're seeing in commodities. UK's FTSE, that one eked out gains of what, 0.3%, while CAC fell about 0.2%. The German DAX, that one too dipped 0.07%. The real cuts we saw in the peripheral indices, the Spanish index, that one was down by almost 0.5%. We saw some cuts come by in the Ukrainian index too. That one was down by about 0.75%, but decent gains seen in the emerging market pack. The Brazilian index, that one ended with gains of close to about 0.5%. The Russian index was shut in trade yesterday.
Okay, well, President Trump praised Saudi Arabia's King Salman bin Abdulaziz in a tweet on Monday, days after the Saudi leader removed a number of prominent officials in an anti-corruption crackdown. He tweeted that he approves of the crackdown in Saudi Arabia. Sri Jagaraja reports on the same.
I just want to pick up on the alliances between Washington and Riyadh, because I think that is an important dynamic as well. It's very clear here that the White House is offering its full support to Riyadh, whether it's on the anti-corruption drive or whether it's on this proxy war that Saudi has been fighting with Iran. And whether the end goal here is to try to win the IPO business and get Aramco listed in the NYSE is anyone's guess. But President Trump, in a tweet, has said that he has great confidence in King Salman and in the Crown Prince. They know exactly what they're doing. Those arrested, he says, have been milking their country for years. And then the Pentagon has been backing Saudi foreign policy, effectively accusing Iran of arming and supporting the Houthi militias in Yemen. So it's these proxy wars in the region between Saudi and Iran that are taking on, arguably, a new disturbing momentum. And the danger here, for Saudi at least, is that it is opening multiple fronts, multiple new fronts as well, when you consider Qatar, Iran, Lebanon, and internally as well, in terms of the anti-corruption drive and the seeds of political unrest, arguably, it may be sowing. In terms of foreign policy, and the oil market is watching this very, very closely, there's increased confrontation risk with Iran. That is the common denominator.
Okay, well, that's the latest, and you can see the repercussion take place in the crude prices. In the world of commodities, crude oil prices have risen 3.5% overnight, hitting what we are seeing as the highest level since early of July 2015, as Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, as we just alluded, cemented his power with an anti-corruption crackdown, while the US rig count fell and markets have continued to tighten as well.
From the precious metal space, gold inched down early trade after gaining nearly 1% in the previous session. It eased as firmer Asian stocks marked a 10-year peak.
In the currency space, the dollar sags, knocked away from 8-month highs versus the yen, which is the Japanese yen, as Treasury yields have slipped on uncertainty over whether the Republicans in the US can pass their tax bill in a timely manner. Also, the lack of clarity on what the Fed is going to look like going forward weighed on investor sentiment as well. However, which saw some amount of profit booking. Anisha joins in to give us all of the market cues this morning. Anisha.
Well, good morning, Ekta. Yes, as you mentioned, the market yesterday was a bit mixed. We saw the Sensex ending in the green, but the Nifty ended pretty much flat, just mildly in the red. If you look at the fund flows, however, there's something to cheer, because after the 2 4-digit buy number that we saw from FIIs last week, today as well there's an FII buy number of 576 crores in cash market versus DI net sell of around 264 crores. And remember, even for Friday's trading session, it would have been a net buy for the FIIs if not for that big bulk deal. It is still early, but some experts do say that these might be the early sign that we are seeing in terms of the reversal of the trend that we had seen of FIIs outflows last year. In terms of the other global cues, if you look at the US markets, the handoff from the mother market was rather strong, because all these indices again closed at record highs. Dow was pretty much flat, but we saw Nasdaq gaining around 0.3%. European markets, they were a bit mixed. We saw FTSE closing in the green, but other than that, CAC and DAX were closing in the red. If you look at the Asia right now, all of these stocks, all of these indices like Nikkei, Straits are holding up in the green with 0.5% gain the last time I checked, and even the likes of Kospi and Taiwanese index were up in the green firmly. So the SGX 50 for right now was suggesting 25 points uptick when we open. If you look at the domestic cues, apart from earnings where we have the names the likes of BHEL, Cipla, Balrampur, Castrol, Dalmia, Manappuram Finance, etc., the other major cue for the domestic markets will be the crude impact. Remember, the crude overnight saw a rally of around 3%. Now, of course, that will impact the inflation and fiscal and the overall expectation of the rate cut by the RBI, but in the interim we'll see a positive impact on the likes of ONGC, Oil India, which is not, the oil move is not too much positive for the likes of OMCs and crude dependent industries like aviation and paints. Back to you.
All right, Anisha, we'll keep an eye out on those stocks that you alluded to, but what are the other stocks you're watching out for?
Well, yes, I mentioned about the crude impacts. So the likes of ONGC, Oil India may be in the green, whereas we might see some negative impact coming on the aviation and paint stocks. Other than that, we are hearing some reports that SEBI might consider raising the minimum limit for promoters to be 70% versus 75%. Maximum limit to be 70 versus 75. That will mean all the likes of Wipro, Siemens, ABB might see some kind of impact. Infra companies will also be in focus. Remember, today is the day when NHS is scheduled to meet to decide on the representations made by the BARD company. So if that decision comes out, that would really be the trigger for all those counters. Other than that, Arvind might be in focus. The company is expected to hold a press conference tomorrow, and wherein we understand that the board is mulling a demerger of the branded and the retail business. So that will be in focus as well. Muthoot Finance has launched the QIP. The price range is around 601 to 610. So that might see some impact today as well. Crompton Consumer, this is something that had been reported in papers earlier, but now we officially know that Kenstar is being bought over by Everstone and CG Consumer is out of the fray. Other than that, HFCL has backed an order of around 1,300 odd crores. That might see some positive impact. Tata Chemicals, something that CNBC TV18 alerted you earlier. They have announced the sale of the fertilizer business and sold it off around 375 crores. Axis Cases is looking to acquire one of the companies for 175 crores. Reliance Communication, that one has been under pressure of late. That enters into binding MOU to sell 100% equity in non-core DTH business. And other than that, we'll see a lot of earnings impact. The list should come up for you on the screen. The good earnings as well as bad earnings. Just to name a few, good KEC and Torrent Power, and weak earnings from the likes of Thomas Cook and Gujarat Gas. Back to you.
It's not just India, but the Paradise Papers, they're sending shockwaves across the globe. The biggest revelations among them are one that puts the US President Donald Trump in a tough spot. His Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross is revealed to have ties with Russian billionaires who are known allies of Vladimir Putin. The papers show that Ross has investments in a shipping company, and a major client of this company is Russian energy major. Speaking exclusively to CNBC, Ross said that he is not obligated to disclose these investments, and also denied having any contact with Russians named in the Paradise Papers.
Let me start off straight away by asking you to deal with these allegations that you concealed your position in Navigator from the US committee that had to ratify you as Commerce Secretary.
Right. Well, that's totally wrong. It was disclosed on the Form 278, which is the financial disclosure form, in my case, 3 times. 10.14.1.3, 10.15.1.3, and 24.1.4.2, as well as on the public website of the Office of Government Ethics, namely OGE.gov. So it's totally incorrect.
So when Senator Blumenthal says you misled the committee by not revealing Navigator's relationship with the Russian company Seabor, you completely reject that allegation?
Well, so that's a different question. My obligation is to disclose companies in which I'm an officer, a director, or an investor. I am neither an officer nor a director nor an investor in Seabor. In fact, I've never met them, don't know the people, have nothing to do with the negotiation of the charter arrangement. The only commercial arrangement between Navigator and Seabor is a charter arrangement. That charter arrangement was made when Seabor was not under sanctions, and frankly, Seabor is not under sanctions to this very day. If a company not under sanction is just like any other company, period.
Okay, well, moving on, just days ahead of the GST Council meeting in Guwahati this Friday, the Congress party is going on the offensive. Finance ministers from all the Congress ruled states came together in New Delhi and slammed the rollout of the goods and services tax. They believe this has been a lost opportunity in terms of jobs created, and the implementation has caused severe pain to the small and medium industries. They also went on to ask for a rejig of the items in the 28% tax bracket. And it's not just the Congress. West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee is also stepping up the attack. She tweeted, and I quote, "Great selfish tax to harass the people, to take away jobs, to hurt businesses, to finish the economy. Government of India has totally failed to tackle GST," end quote. Here are some Congress finance ministers with the rationale behind this fresh GST salvo.
Great opportunity loss. We fitted a great, opportunity where Indian GDP could have actually grown by 2%, as was being suggested, whereas actually the GDP growth rate has actually slumped. So it also translates into millions of jobs lost, millions of potential money which could have been earned by India. I'm a little alarmed that the last 2 months compensation has stabilized at something like 8,000 crores. And if this continues, then how is even Government of India in a position to actually fulfill its commitments to the state?
There are many items in the 28% which need to come down to 18%, and compliance issues from the business side are also there. So there are issues from the consumer side and there are issues from the taxpayer side. So we are keen that these issues are addressed with seriousness and in a meaningful manner. And we are also demanding that many of the rates should also come down.
Council will have, apart from regular agenda, 3 committee is already working on different issues. One is Fitman Committee, which is working, and the council has asked the Fitman Committee to submit his report on the Guwahati meeting. So obviously the Fitman Committee will look into rationalization of tax bracket, and whatever Fitman Committee will submit its recommendation, that recommendation will be further scrutinized by the council and it will take a call. Second, decision on consensus. There are no dissenting notes whatever from either Mr. Bairagurada or Mr. Badal. I think we have also raised many issues in council. They have also raised many issues in council, and something is being accepted in a spirit of consensus.